Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and it's time for this week's Friday Morning GM. Joining me, as always, is Voss Laricos. Voss, how you doing?
Ken, I got to say, I am inspired by Steve Bisciotti's press conference on Tuesday. Great to hear him talk after 7 years of silence. Very, very optimistic about the future of the organization. And, I think he hit it out of the park. You have Pat McAfee putting a soundtrack. I don't know if you saw that. That was
just
hysterical.
ridiculous. Yeah.
That song was stuck in my head most of the day yesterday.
I did see it. I know what you mean, but in terms of the music getting stuck in your head, but I wish it wasn't in this particular case. But Bisciotti, outstanding performance by him, and
For sure.
I think we've each got some takeaways from that press conference. But in general, the way the firing went down. Did we cover all that last week, or do we?
We kind of had some bits and pieces from reporting, but I think Bisciotti disputed a lot of that. That was one of my main takeaways from the press conference.
Okay.
But should we talk about the news of the day first? John Harbaugh has latched on with the New York Giants. I think probably a pretty good fit for him. Might have to adjust his style a little bit to handle the New York media, but they do have some pieces in place on both sides of the ball, and an organization that certainly coveted him. So I'm happy to see him land on his feet for sure.
Yeah, of course. And I think that he's going into a very good situation. And what's not clear to me right now is whether he's now going to be in a strong coach role where the general manager almost reports to him. That's really not clear from what they've said so far. Obviously, they're keeping their current GM. And so it'll be interesting whether or not Harbaugh has a big hand in personnel decisions, and in particular in the draft, an area where I don't think I could point to his record and point to a bunch of success.
I would agree with that. Maybe one of his bigger weaknesses in the last few years was his input on personnel. So apparently he had dinner with Joe Shine last night. I read the article because it was a specialty menu would be in a restaurant tour. I was interested to see what they served, but they were hand in hand apparently. And those two, we really don't know how much impact Harbaugh had on DeCosta. So in a way, I'm excited to see how DeCosta performs unshackled by some of Harbaugh's constraints.
I will say, even given the fact that DeCosta is a consensus builder, and that's the way it seems to be, a lot of this is from things I've heard secondhand, but also the thing I saw firsthand that led me to the consensus builder conclusion was some of the video that was out there and some of the audio that was out there about them about to make the Malachi Starks pick. And he was challenging people to say, well, why is this such an easy decision? And, things like that. That's consensus building. That's what happens under that sort of a umbrella. If you have a pretty broad scouting department and you have a general manager, and in the Ravens case, you have an Ozzie also sitting around, a very voice of reason kind of thing, you're not going to run into the problem with Harbaugh dominating the selection process. So I don't really believe he had much in Baltimore here. He's one voice, and then it's very much like the Bisciotti thing. Bisciotti's word is final in terms of this hire specifically, and on the draft picks, I believe that was the case. And I think anything else breaks down the silo system that has worked so well and created such stability for the Ravens. So if the Giants are getting away from that, caveat emptor.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Building consensus is management 101. Not only do you want to have more opinions, but you want to make their whole team feel like they are included in the decision-making process, make them feel like they're part of the process. So I certainly hope that the Ravens continue that model, and we'll see how it plays out in New York for John. He's a floor raiser. We'll see if he's a ceiling raiser. I am interested to see the data point. And I think Bisciotti alluded to this a couple of times in the press conference, to see how John fares without the Ravens structure supporting him, because there's a question of, was he a very good coach? Was he a great coach? And this opportunity in New York will probably determine that.
So if that's the only problem that people have, is whether John Harbaugh was a very good coach or a great coach, then no problem. That's a reasonable thing. I think it's the people who are saying don't let the door hit you on the way out, and screw you and take this guy with you to New York kind of thing, are the people I don't want to hear from right now.
It got a little contentious between John and the fan, and I think some of the comments he made, end of the bar and that sort of stuff came off as condescending towards the fans, and the fans reciprocated. And I did think it was interesting that I thought the tone of Mike Tomlin's resignation letter compared to John Harbaugh's, I guess, departure letter, you could call it, was different. It was definitely a different tone, and I do think that part was part of the, as Steve alluded to, he wanted to free John from the scrutiny of the fans. 18 years is a long time, and it's not a fault on John. He's a stand-up guy. He's a great guy on a personal level, but there were some flaws in the football operations, and when he became stubborn and a little condescending towards the fans, I think that heightened the animosity.
Okay, well, fair enough. Let's leave it at that. So anyway, John goes into a pretty good situation. He's certainly got a good quarterback, but he doesn't have Lamar Jackson. So it'll be interesting to see if he tries to have his group, including Monken, who apparently is going with him, build that offense around Jackson Dart in a similar way. Jackson has some ability as a runner, but he ain't Lamar Jackson. Nobody is.
No.
And he has some ability as a passer, but he ain't Lamar Jackson. Really, nobody is. And that's going to be very interesting how he works with a less talented quarterback. Now, that said, he came into the league with Joe Flacco and 5 years made 5 straight playoff appearances, won a bunch of playoff games and a Super Bowl.
And he has some good pieces. Malik Neighbors coming back. He hasn't had a number 1 wide receiver in a long time.
Flowers?
Flowers, sure, Flowers.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just not. I meant to say it's not traditionally the way he's gone about it. And some pass rushers on defense. I'm interested to see if the Giants are interested in overpaying maybe for some of the Ravens unrestricted free agents,
like
or maybe or maybe even trading for a certain linebacker that I think the Ravens could harvest the cap space and use it a little bit differently. But I would certainly expect that a lot of the coaching staff is going to go with John, and a handful of the players are going to go so he can instill his culture, his way. The guys already know how he likes to do things.
We need to stick a pin in the trade for another week because we got a lot to talk about with coaching. But let's start with the press conference first. Bisciotti and DeCosta, and a terrific group in terms of the questions. I thought were very good. The people who got to the microphone. First of all, they wanted to make it very clear whether they had 1 or 2 questions, a 1-part question, a 2-part question kind of thing. A lot of people wanted to ask two-part question. I think he made fun of Jerry Coleman for us. I'm surprised it's not a 4-part question.
And Cordell, he said, "Oh, you guys are good at 2-part questions."
Cordell. Cordell doesn't have the long-term tenure that those guys do, but he's certainly very good. And I didn't think he would pull that on him, but maybe he knows he can take it. So that's the good part about that. Now, we were going to each have 3 things we took away from this press conference. I came up with 4. So maybe I should start and then I get to
you go first, please.
All right. So the first thing that I thought was very telling about the entire thing is how many times during the conversation that Bisciotti basically pointed to DeCosta about him being in charge. He is entirely in charge of the preliminary coaching search, identifying all the names that are going to be done. There's a panel of 3 people that were identified. It was Sashi and Ozzie and Eric DeCosta in terms of putting that together. But it's clearly this is Eric's show. Eric is the ringmaster of the circus, and Bisciotti is the owner of the circus, or the one who's the judge of the circus at the end of this time. Who's going to do that. So I thought that how that's going to be done, 4 to 5 in-person interviews after a series of perhaps 15 to 20 interviews, which we're going to get to a little bit later in this show, most of which have already been concluded.
That was interesting. We thought, I don't remember the mechanics of the 2008 search, whether Bisciotti was point man. I would assume that Ozzie probably did most of the legwork, and it seems like that's what Eric's doing now. They're casting a very, very wide net, and that's exactly what you want to do here. I mean, anybody of interest, any name even that doesn't seem like an ideal fit, interview them, see if they feel them out. Maybe you want to entice your whoever the hire is to consider them for a coordinator position down the road. But I did think that was interesting that Steve was not, as the hiring and staffing guru that he is. But it's probably smart to delegate to Eric, and that way Eric has to take some accountability as well for who the hire is going to be long term.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Even though it is not his silo, once again, I mean, all this is I think a potential gold star earned or not earned in terms of his career resume for being a part of the selection committee here. But if he gives him 5 candidates because Bisciotti wants 5 candidates and Bisciotti chooses the wrong guy, you lose some of that value.
Yeah, that's
this
true.
isn't a consensus building thing. And I'm sorry, go to your first thing because I know this is.
Oh, okay. All right. So my first thing was that I thought Bisciotti validated a lot of what the fans have been critiquing Harbaugh for. And there's been a lot of debate back and forth in various mediums about John and the team's performance. And Steve flat out came out and said they had the 3rd most wins of the last decade, and they still underperformed because they lost as a higher seed in the playoffs, because they've blown too many leads, because lately a lot of the players didn't develop, they didn't execute. So I really thought that more than that, Steve made clear that this was not a rash decision by any means. He talked to this Bisciotti, he said, about a month ago. They began gathering names for the search process a few weeks ago. Steve even made mention that certain things that John had done in years past irritated him, but he pushed them to the back of his mind. And then when he was coming to these decisions, they came back to the forefront of his mind as a way to validate his, decision to not have regret. And really the comment, which was probably made tongue in cheek. And let me first just preface by saying we hear what we want to hear in these conferences.
Yeah, I agree. I'm hearing some of that right now.
probably by design. I think Steve probably does that by design and gives everybody a little bit of meat on the bone to what they want to hear. And also that if Tyler made the kick, that John would have had the job for another week. So that was really the one to me that said, the stability, continuity, just get to the playoffs. Steve wants more than that. He probably would have let John go if they lost in the wild card round like Pittsburgh did, which was probably a pretty big departure from what we all thought, 6 months ago.
Okay. So I heard the same thing. Okay. And I agree that had they lost to the same way the Steelers did, no doubt about it, Harbaugh would have been gone. If he'd have won that game, I think it's much more unlikely that Harbaugh would have been gone. So I don't think it was for 2 weeks or for 1 week or for 2 weeks. I think it was for 1 week. And that's where I think that some of this breaks down. The thing that Bisciotti said, which was very much, I believe, what he really means is we were in the AFC Championship 2 years ago.
Yep.
We lost the divisional round this last year, and this year we didn't even make the playoffs. And
backwards.
Yeah, so that's okay. And see, we got to own this record of underperformance, and that's fine. I think the more he got specific about it, the more I'd say it wasn't really a value. And there wasn't that much about it because he really lauded the reporters there for not asking him about the nitty gritty of why he was fired. Did it have something to do with Monken or, wanting to keep him or not? And obviously we thought there wasn't a great relationship between Monken at one point this midseason. And now Monken's following Harbaugh to New York. So
yeah, I guess I just the point I'm trying to make is this was a decision that Steve had been thinking about for a while. It wasn't a rash decision, and it wasn't because Lamar wanted Monken out and John said I'm keeping Monken. There was a lot more. Yeah, there was a lot.
I agree with that. Now, second part about this is validation of the fans' beliefs. The fans specifically, he said, were not a big part of the reason why he fired John Harbaugh, and that is completely appropriate. It is completely appropriate. So, I think there are people in the media, myself, Jonas Schaefer mentioned that, had the same degree of surprise in terms of the fact that he was fired. I was actually too ambivalent with what happened in the final game. I'm very frustrated with the Zay Flowers situation, with the Zay Flowers not kneeling. And that is something that could have been fixed and could have added a substantial portion of their chance to beat the Steelers and get to the playoffs. Would they have probably lost that game to the Texans anyway? There's a very good chance. The Steelers looked like crap in that game. Lamar being there might have made a difference, but they certainly could have lost that game, and that might have been the end anyway. But I really think in hearing Bisciotti, he made the choice for the right reasons. The fact that he was thinking about it already is just fine. In terms of after that loss to the Bengals, or the two losses to the Bengals and the Steelers, which really would make about the month, then that was the point at which he was.
And the blown lead to New England, I think that was a pretty tough week too. I think that's the week we talked about it, and we were saying, what's the probability he gets fired? And you offered me a wager, and I should have went with my instinct because Steve did, because we had the same one.
So we had a chance that he gets fired if he makes the playoffs, and a chance he gets fired if he doesn't make the playoffs. Chance he's back if he didn't make the playoffs. So
yep.
No wager. But
no bet.
Is it my turn to
yes,
okay? So the second one was about the players and their viewpoint, and frankly management in the end too. But he's asked directly, will Lamar have any say? I said he'll have a say. I want to hear what he thinks, and I want to hear from my star players. He didn't say star players, but he wants to hear from his players what they think. He also wants to hear from his executive, but he maintained very firmly, this is ultimately my choice and my choice only. And I thought that was a very good thing. And he backed it up, and he said, I can't give my players that power. And I think that's the way it's got to be.
A great perspective, I think, from Steve. That's definitely the way it should be. It's so refreshing to hear him be so blunt and candid after you spend the other, 11 and a half months of the year hearing coach speak and, that sort of thing. I really enjoy hearing him speak. But as far as the players, you think he said it was about a 20%. Their input was maybe 20% of the decision.
Yeah.
And he said the fans were a small portion, but the sentiment of the fans was some. And then, I'm sure Sashi Brown, and as much as he mentioned Sash, seems like he's definitely in his ear. And Eric and Ozzie and Steve. And that was really, each of them get a slice of the pie, and Steve gets the biggest slice, and that's how they make decisions.
If you had to judge that, I'm going to just tell you what my numbers are. How would you change them? I'd say, he said 80% the department heads. I'm saying it's 40 DeCosta, 28 Ozzie, and 12 Sashi. That would be my division of the 80 in terms of the importance of those viewpoints. Great. It's great that he's taken Sashi's advice, but this isn't Sashi's call to make. And from a football operations perspective, it doesn't make any sense. But if from a communication standpoint, it might. If he's saying, if Harbaugh is saying the wrong things to the media, then Sashi's a person who can judge that.
I think maybe the value of Sashi is coming from outside the organization. He hasn't been there for 20 years like everybody else. So he brings a little bit of a fresh perspective, and you're not quite stuck in your ways. I really can't speak to that. I do think it was telling that he didn't say John didn't lose the locker room necessarily. The players were ambivalent. And they say, well, we've got some problems. You want to make some changes, but that's your call. And apparently Lamar said that, and apparently Ronnie Stanley said that. And whoever the unnamed player is, who went to his house, which I would probably guess is Kyle Hamilton. But, those are the guys he talked to. And they weren't saying you have to get rid of John, but they weren't saying we have John's back 100%. And that meant something to him, as it should. I think, so that's how I see it.
Okay. I think I'm done with that one. Yep. So what's your second one?
So my second one is that I believe, based on Steve's comments, and this may be me filtering it through my own wishful lens, that some changes to the Ravens way are on the table. Not that they're going to happen, but they're at least worth considering. They underachieved the last 10 years, according to Steve, by doing it a certain way, and now they can take a step back and reevaluate, is this the way to do it? The things I would mention are the play caller head coach versus CAO head coach, the dynasty coach versus short-term head coach, but perhaps changes to the organizational chart. I was very surprised that Steve wasn't married to the independent silos, as I previously thought. The comment that if Lamar does not extend, they'll push $30 million into void year.
Every day, companies you've never heard of are making millions off your personal data. Your name, address, phone number, even details about your family are pulled from public records on the internet, then sold without your consent. There's an entire marketplace built on your privacy, and most people have no idea it exists. Aura fights back. Aura removes your personal data from broker sites and keeps it off. Aura also alerts you fast if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura is more than just a data broker removal system. It's a full digital security suite that protects every part of your online life. Aura gives you a VPN to stay private, antivirus to block threats, a password manager for safer logins, and spam call protection to shut down scammers. Aura scans the dark web for your most sensitive information and notifies you instantly if anything is exposed. And if your identity is ever stolen, you're backed by up to $5 billion in insurance and 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other service charges about the same, but only cover one or two areas. Aura gives you everything: data broker removal, identity and credit monitoring, device protection, and fraud support, all in one simple app. Aura removes what's already exposed, protects what's not, and puts you back in control. Go to aura.com/remove for complete digital protection and peace of mind. That's aura.com/remove.
Let me tell you about the online cannabis company that's changing the game. Mood.com. They created an entirely line of functional gummies, 100% federally legal THC blends, discreetly delivered right to your doorstep. And here's the best part. You can get 20% off your first order at Mood.com with the promo code Ravens. Now, I've tried a bunch of their gummies myself. Each one's totally unique. The Sleepy Time gummies knock me out right away. They help me unwind fast, leave me refreshed the next morning. The Epic Euphoria gummies, they're perfect for when your day just isn't going the way you want it to go. What makes Mood special is how they pair the THC with natural herbs and adaptogens. You won't find blends like this at any local shop. They've got gummies designed for focus, relaxation, clarity, even energy, all made from cannabis grown on small, family-owned American farms. No pesticides, no shortcuts, just high-quality weed you can trust. Plus, Mood backs everything with a 100-day satisfaction guarantee. So head on over to Mood.com, check out their amazing selection, and don't forget to use the promo code Ravens at checkout to save 20% off your first order.
Which is a lot more than they've done in void years in the past. And the last is that DeCosta said they haven't traditionally shopped for big ticket items, but if they have more cap space, they might try to do that. So those would be the things that
you're hearing that through your own lens, no doubt about it, in my mind, no doubt about it. But let's go through those one at a time and remind me of the last two first, because I want to address those.
Big ticket items from DeCosta.
So big ticket items is the first one. So Bisciotti wasn't directly asked about that, but DeCosta made his longtime preference very clear about, I don't want to both give a lot of draft capital and then pay somebody a top of market contract. And
we're on the same page about that for sure.
So, and that's the one that matters, because otherwise big ticket items, they either fall into your lap or they don't in terms of the draft, or you sign your own guys or you don't. But I don't even have a problem with going out and paying a free agent a lot of money, because you have some amount of budget for that. All of those three are fine. The one that is off the fucking table for all time is trading away two number ones and signing a guy to a huge contract.
We're in complete agreement there. We're in complete. We've
that's no change to the Ravens' way, is my point. That's no change at all.
The change, as I interpreted that, is they were going to be shoppers, and they would potentially sign a big ticket item in free agency, which they probably haven't done since Marcus Williams. That's how I interpreted it.
But there have been a number of big ticket free agents in the history of the Ravens that I would point to that I don't think that's really been opposed. The kind of player that they have not really signed a big ticket pass rusher in the team's history. That, I guess, that would be a difference if you want to talk about that.
Dumerville?
Oh yeah, you're right, Dumerville. And Dumerville wasn't even really a super expensive one. He was $7 million a year at the time, which was something. But they had money for that after the Super Bowl win, that they still budgeted. Trevor Price was probably a bigger contract relative to the time. He was making about $6 million a year, and maybe the biggest ever was McCrary, way back in 97. At 97, 98, whichever was the year he joined the Ravens. They've had some that they've signed over the years anyway.
All three of those were great signings too. So McCrary they stole him from Seattle, on ascending player, and he was only making $4 million back then, but future value, that's probably 15
Yeah,
or something. Who knows?
Yeah, it'd be a lot in today's dollars.
Present value, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
The other one was void years.
So void years. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they've done more with void years the last few years anyway. And I'm not saying they can't do it, but the specific void year mentioned in here was different. And I do think that they're not going to back off this particular thing. The Ravens want to get Lamar Jackson's contract decided before free agency begins.
Mm-hmm.
The cataclysmic problem they could have would be if they go out and make free agent moves based on the expectation that Lamar can be signed, even though they have the dollars available the first year. Lamar backs off that and decides he wants to go to free agency. And the Ravens are left holding their bag and worse in terms of signing a player like Tyler Linderbaum, who they would not want if it wasn't for Lamar Jackson, for example. Okay. So that's the kind of thing. I don't believe for a second they're looking to sign players that they really don't want. Yeah, I don't think they want to become Philadelphia for sure, but I don't think they want to sign a bunch of free agents this year unless they have the Lamar Jackson deal set. I agree.
Yeah. My point is just that was a different. I've never heard him say, "Just move the money down the road, or else we want to open a new window." But if we can't, it was a slight 10% pivot or 15% pivot from what I've heard him say in the past.
He's actually positioning with that statement. He's signaling, and the guy he's signaling to is Lamar. He's basically telling him, look, we have a way to solve this problem. If you don't want to play ball with us and extend the contract, we can still field a competitive team these next 2 years. But the implicit thing that goes with that is we're not going to be listening too carefully to exactly what you want. If you if you are not going to do what you need to do to extend the contract and give us some cap relief that is really of longer term than that. And that's where I think the difference is. And I really don't believe the Ravens are entering a new void year era based on that comment.
No, that's not what I mean either. But $30 million, if they're going to push it, they didn't do that when Flacco was up for extension. They didn't say, if you don't, we're just going to push it off and create space so we can keep the team.
Yeah, they did that a bunch of times with Flacco and with others. They've done it a bunch of times over the years. They've done simple restructures to push that money off into the future. I mean, all of the current problems with both Roquan and Humphrey are both a case of them every year basically pushing the full amount of money into the future. Now, sometimes only the extension of the life of the contract, but recent years, they've gone into void years with this. So recent years, and Nelson Aguilar, OBJ, I mean, they've been smaller amounts in those two cases, but they went into void years in those two as well. So it's just moving money around, Voss. I mean,
I understand that. That's exactly what he said. It was that we could move the money on however you want it. There was a time when they did not want to move money around, or at least to that extent. That's the point I'm trying to make. Organizational chart. My point was I was surprised he didn't say we're 100% set in stone. We're going to keep the silos the way they are.
Okay, there's a reason for that. Okay, and here's what he did. He put Eric DeCosta in charge of this process. And he also mentioned at a later point, in the new head coach, whoever he is, DeCosta is going to have to mentor him to a certain degree.
Yeah,
I 100% guarantee you. He also said that it had worked well with the Ravens because he'd said, okay, Harbs, you're in this silo, and even though I didn't use the word silo, of course, and DeCosta, you're in this silo, and if you ever need me to break the tie, I'm here. And he says they never came to him over that. And by the way, no two managers, hearing that kind of a thing from a boss who knows that he wants to stay hands off and wants the football guys making the football decision, is going to ever want to break that tradition. Even if they have to play rock, paper, scissors for the decision, they'd rather do that than go to Bisciotti on the call. And the fact that these guys live backyard to backyard made it that much easier.
I think it depends on who they hire. If they hire a really young guy, I think it is possible that they put him underneath DeCosta, and DeCosta has a say in who he picks.
We got another bet. We got another bet going on here.
I just said it's possible. I didn't say probable. Okay. But the other one I said was a play caller head coach.
Okay, so
And
I think
or a short-term head coach. Those would be the last.
okay, so a short-term head coach, it's possible. A play caller head coach, it's certainly possible because he mentioned several times how a number of teams had gone to that. So I think that he's admitting that that's a general trend in the NFL. I do think he actually has a bent for a CEO head coach, and some of the guys he gave a pass to, like Stefanski, he obviously has play calling responsibilities also, but Weaver and Saleh all have a CEO type background at some point. Saleh's been a defensive coordinator. He certainly could usurp that authority. But I think one of the things that Bisciotti has really appreciated about who Harbaugh is the fact his eyes are on the field all the time. And, that he's not beholden to one side of the ball or the other.
I think that's a very fair point. And you made that last week as well, and I think it's very valid. And I've heard national media critics say these play callers, the McVays and Shanahans, are not good in-game managers.
Mm-hmm.
The flip side of that coin is there still more value to have a play caller? And I was going to say this for later, but I might as well get to it now. There's 8 head coaches that made the divisional round. 5 are play callers: McVay, Shanahan, Johnson, McDonald, and Peyton all call plays. McDermott shares play calling duty with his defensive coordinator. Vrabel gave it up for the first time this year, but still calls high leverage plays. And D'Amico Ryans gave it up for the first time this year, but still does game planning. And DeCosta did make a mention that he wants an X's and O's expert. So I'm kind of leaning that way, that I think that's what's winning right now in the NFL. And you can hire a associate head coach who could fill that role of keeping eyes on the field when you need to turn your back and sit down with your play caller, your quarterback or whoever,
or your defense or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that might be the way to do it. What brings you more value? And there could be a way where DeCosta, if he is above, he takes part of the responsibility for creating the culture if you really have that wizard play caller. So that's where I am.
So, okay. The big advantage, the very biggest advantage from having the head coach be the play caller is that you get access to the very best play callers in the entire business. And the ones that demand it, you get that. That's the big advantage. It's very substantial. And depending on the right guy, I would give it to him. Okay. I would let him have control over both sides. And then you have an associate. I think what you do is you have an associate who you really trust to breathe the same sort of fire you do, go over to your players and beat them up over what they're not doing. I think you still want to keep your eyes on the field. But so I'm okay with that. But I think the other good thing about the CEO method is you don't have to fire either good coordinator when your head coach fails to do the job. So you it's a further siloing of those responsibilities that doesn't have one side of the ball separate from that in a way that is very positive. They still do have both those guys report to the head coach. It's not like
it insulates the head coach in a way, but if you have the head coach who is also the play caller, who's that X's and O's innovator, you can count on that stability year after year after year. You're not going to lose it. You're not going to lose the Kubiak or the McDonald. You just always have that, and you got to find somebody to go on the other side of the ball, but at least one side of the ball is in good shape.
Yeah, that's
hypothetically
the advantage. That is the advantage. There's no doubt about it. Okay, so that was your second thing. Third, I think we're up to my third now, right?
Yes.
Okay, boy, this is going slow here. Sorry about this. I thought this will be quick. The hands-off nature of Steve Bisciotti shined through this press conference time after time. I thought it was very good. So start with the fact that this is only the third major decision Steve Bisciotti's made in 25 years as an owner. 25 years. Fired Billick and brought on his Harbaugh as the successor there. He promoted EDC over Ozzie, which that's more like half a move because both of them were so friendly and so amenable to the situation. And Ozzie was retirement age and all of that stuff, but he did that. And then he fired Harbaugh, and he's going to hire whoever he does this time for third time. I thought that was remarkable, in terms of his hands-offness, that the fact that they supposedly have never gone to him to break a tie on anything is, boy, that's just good under management to understand where you shouldn't be screwing with poking the bear on something like that. And then I thought that all elements of DeCosta running the initial search were very hands-off-ish, because you get me involved when you need to get me involved. That's the point where I'll be involved. I thought terrific, really shine through.
Yeah, he certainly holds DeCosta in very high regard. I thought the comment about how 2 years ago the offensive line was a question mark and the pass rush was a question mark, and Eric pieced it together 2 years ago, but it didn't work this last year, and he was kind of putting that at the feet of the coaching staff. Just another indication that he holds Eric in very high esteem, as he well should. So I'm really optimistic about this leadership team. I really am.
Okay.
I'll go on to my third point then, if we're ready. To me, it was a striking shift in tone from particularly the 2013 State of the Ravens post Super Bowl, where the message was contend every season, contend every season, contend every season. We're going to trade Bolden so we can get, floor raisers. Steve now in his letter, both in his letter and in his press conference, has put winning championships at the very forefront of the focus. I think, and then he also set out a timeline where he's going to sell the team in 10 to 15 years, and he wants to win 1 or 2 Super Bowls in the meantime. I don't think that's going to have a massive shift in the way they do business.
Right.
But I think if you're going to be focused on a hard goal, focus on that. And I think John kind of over the years swayed it a little bit more towards lower end of expectations, and Steve is now putting it again at the higher end of expectations. So I did think that was notable that he does it just from Steve. As many times as he said stability and continuity, we didn't hear him say any of that this time. We heard him say winning championships.
Well, let's see how that manifests itself, I guess is what I'd say. I choose to hope that that's really not what he's doing, because we're very well known as being on different sides of this thing. I want to see contention every year. I think you're fucking your season ticket holders when you basically have any kind of a tank year, or you're willing to ride the roller coaster of parity in the NFL. So I want him to stay with a contend every year at the minimum. And that doesn't mean you don't try for championships. Of course you try for championships. It just doesn't mean you don't have these all-in moves. They could have easily done that. And we heard the counter immediately from DeCosta in this session when he says, you're usually being arrogant or making a mistake when you think you're only one player away. So they could have gone for Micah Parsons at the beginning of this year. It would have been an enormous mistake. The best they would have done is get to the first round and lose to the Texans. That's probably the best they would have done. And he's hurt, of course.
And he's probably not going to miss the first half of next year too. The one player away comment, I completely agree with you there. No question. I'm not quite as win now as some are that want to totally mortgage the future, but I would, as I've mentioned several times, another 10% on the dial towards championship. Really just the focus of it, because Harbaugh seemed to not even want to say the word Super Bowl for so many years. He just didn't even want that expectation. And Steve made that clear that is his expectation.
Okay, well, that's fair. It's fair to want to be in the Super Bowl. It's fair to want to make progress towards that goal every single year. And if you don't, if you seem to go in the wrong direction, to make change, all that is fine. All that is fine. But the notion that it's a binary 1 or 0, that if you make the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl, actually, it's a 1 and it's a 0 if you any other result, that I can't live with. And I really can't live with it as a season ticket holder. I wouldn't want an organization that wanted to be run that way.
I can't agree with it as a former season ticket holder and current pundit. So I agree with you.
All right. Let me go to the fourth thing for me, which is the pass he gave to previous head coaches. He talked about the coaches who were the hot ticket the last cycle, which she defines as 6 to 7 years. And by the way, the patience that he talks about going forward, totally at odds with the notion that I need to win Super Bowls right now. If he's saying the next guy maybe has 6 years. Yeah. Well, that's a long time.
Sure.
That's 6 years potentially if they get this contract extension done of Lamar Jackson. And
that'll probably be pretty close to the end of Lamar's career, I would think, with the way he plays. But we'll see.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, I thought that was. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Please.
So he gave the pass, and that's clearly directed at Stefanski, Sala, and who am I missing in there? But there are two of the big ones. Flores,
yeah, and McDaniel.
Okay, and McDaniel. Those are our four guys who don't have great career records. He said we're going to judge those those coaches relative to circumstance.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. I think that's smart. I think it's really smart, and I also thought it's throwing a little bit of shade at Harbaugh and saying he benefited from the circumstances here, and the
that's true.
other play. You know what I mean? He mentioned that a couple times, and that's kind of what was my argument point throughout the second half of the season. Look at the record. Okay, but look, we got to consider the circumstances too. Either way, and that's the other one where you hear what you want to hear, right? You hear Steve say that, and you have a candidate that you like. It could be any of the four, but you hear him talking about the one you like.
Right. Well, that's fair enough. And I don't think there's any contention that Harbaugh was fired because of a lack of progress towards an eventual goal, because you'd never fire a coach with Harbaugh's record. I mean, the Ravens lead the league in point differential since the beginning of 2018. It's circumstance, and that is the way to judge it. It's the correct way to judge it, and I don't have a problem with that. Yeah.
Yep. All right. I think that's ready for the next segment.
Yeah, I think we're ready for, and we're falling way behind here. So let's talk about the coaching search a little bit. We might have to have a 2-part episode today here. I think let's do that.
Let's come back.
Let's come back. We'll do a part 2 here. Vas, tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
I am on Twitter X at Vasilis Fiamata, Vasilis Fiamata, and look forward to talking some more in part 2.
Okay. We'll talk the coaching search. Thanks for using #FilmStudy mailbag, folks. Questions are always welcome. Anytime this offseason, we'll direct them to the appropriate show, or we'll get them in a 1 to 3 minute video that I've been putting up. I had a video out just the other day on John Harbaugh and who he is as a coach. It's really pointed at New York Giants fans, but I think Ravens fans may be interested in taking a listen to it too and see if I've got it correct. If I don't, lop it on there for the Giants fans to see. For Vas Larikos, this is Ken McKusick saying goodbye. We'll talk to you next time on Friday Morning GM.